How's it going? Welcome to Creative Corner. What's up, Andrew? How's it going, dude? I was playing music to give a cool introduction and have stuff going on, but it just decided to quit working. So I was trying to provide a soundtrack for us here, but it's not gonna work. So yeah. Well, guys, we have a super special guest today. I'm super excited to announce that actually, you know what, real quick, I'm gonna throw on my headphones really quick. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Let's see here. 1 second. Actually, I'm not going to do that. That hooked to my computer. Awesome. All right, so this should be just fine. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. Good deal. Well, super excited to announce today. I actually know him fairly well. We had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, but we have Graham Sheldon going on today, and he will be joining us today to chat about all things him as a producer and a director of photography. So he's an Emmy Award winning, this is Emmy Award winner Graham Sheldon, resides in Southern California, where he works as a producer and cinematographer. As a member of the Producers Guild of America, he has produced documentary and narrative projects on 6 continents. Feature credits The Right Girls, which is from 2020, that's coming out, The Good Catholic in 2017, Miss White Light 2020, Dry Blood 2019, and So Cold the River in 2020. That's a lot. That's a lot going on this year and last year. So that's really cool. I'm super excited to have him on. So without any further ado, let's have Graham hop on here and get things going, and we will get into producing and, of course, lighting. We'll talk specifically about the Litra studio. Let's see where Graham is. Looks like it's connecting. Graham, how are you, man?
I'm good, Drew. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on today, Creative Corner. Much appreciated.
No, good to be here. Can you hear me, see me
I
okay?
I can hear you just fine. I'm just adjusting my camera there, but I swear every time I talk to you, you look completely different. Or every picture I see, it's you have multiple looks.
Quarantine is the time to be changing the look constantly, right? So that's what I've been up to.
Awesome. Well, that takes away my first question. No, I'm totally kidding. Let's dive right into it, Graham. I was telling them a little bit how you were on the Take 43 podcast a couple weeks ago. So you and I got to chat over the computer and just get to know each other really well. And it's been awesome getting to know you. You're super interesting. Let's just start by letting the viewers know a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this industry, because you are kind of the top of the line producing, director of photography. You've worked on a lot of features, digital releases. How did that
Oh,
all?
stop it. I'm gonna blush, Drew, if you
I
keep
could.
going like this. Yeah, I mean, as you sort of mentioned in the introduction, I've made a couple of features at this point. I started working almost about 3 months out of school in television, which is about a decade now, looking back on it, not to date myself too much, but yeah, and I mean, I was just, I guess luck has a certain part to play in this. I've worked for all sorts of different brands, Dell, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers, Legendary, Nerdist, Nestle, Pepsi, a bunch of different folks on more of the commercial side, and then Vice, BBC, TLC, ITV, HGTV, on sort of documentary kind of reality world. And then recently, I guess as far back as 2017, you mentioned The Good Catholic, sort of started my scripted career. So The Good Catholic sold to Netflix, stars Danny Glover, John C. McGinley, Ren Schmidt, Zach Spicer, and that sort of launched into kind of the feature film part of my career. And so, I've been very lucky. I've been able to bounce back and forth between sort of commercial, documentary, script and narrative. And I actually even spent a year working contract for Electronic Arts on video games like SimCity, the most recent, I think it was SimCity, which would have been like 2012, as a producer as well. So it may seem like I do a bunch of different things, but I really only do producer, DP, and then occasionally there's some crossover that ends up being a director thing, you know what I mean? But I feel like there is, especially in documentary, producer, DP, it's not as big a jump to director. But in
Right.
scripted, there's a lot to do for the DP and producer and scripted. So I tend to like stay in my lane
Yeah.
there, and I get to work with lots of great directors. So.
Yeah, amazing. That's really cool. I mean, you mentioned at the start of all of that, you said the word luck, but I don't think all of those types of diverse projects come with luck. I feel like you work your way into that, and then you get to know the right people, and you do good work. And I think it's a combination of those things. So I think defining luck in your case is just hard work and being around and being on set in those different positions and being good at what being good at what you're doing. I think that that's a huge part of all of that. So with everything going on right now, we know it's with COVID hitting it, things a little bit different, but what's a working day look like to you, say going on to set as a DP and then maybe as a producer? Could you kind of tell some of the viewers maybe I know the difference between a producer and a DP, but some people might not. Can you kind of walk us through that as a producer and then maybe as a DP as well?
Yeah, so what does a sort of an average project look like? I'm going to, I guess, just for the purposes of this, talk digital as sort of the genre, just to make it kind of easier to break down. But in the case of a digital project specifically, I've done a lot of things in the gaming world around Lucasfilm. I did a Battlefront 2 sort of digital project that was a collaboration with NASA back in the day, and then it sort of continued from there, working with a bunch of different game companies around different IP on the digital side. So for digital specifically, it's a little bit different in doc and scripted features. Usually, usually there's a request for proposal, honestly, that'll go into the agency or the production company that I'm working with, and they have a relationship with me, right? And then very often I'm just pitching back like 2-sentence ideas that may or may not ever see the light of day. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, sort of a director's treatment, I would call it. And a director's treatment might be like a page about how I take the creative brief that the client has sent and then what I think I'm going to do with that, right? So in the case of most of the digital projects, it's just taking a video game title and bringing it into the real world in kind of a fun and exciting way, and making it just viewable for the mass market as much as possible. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, a little bit more complicated, but
for sure. No, I mean, we only have so much time, but I think that's a good description in a nutshell. I watched the Lucasfilm stuff with the Star Wars. You had the Jedi's battling. That was really cool. If you're a Star Wars fan, I highly suggest watching that. Also, the Mortal Kombat thing was really cool. The science of Mortal Kombat that you did for that digital release was just really fun. Because I play Mortal Kombat myself, so it was just really fun to break, some of those fatalities down, and just it looks like you guys had a lot of fun, and we dove deeper in that on the podcast. But I highly suggest, if the viewers watching right now, after this is over, go take a look at the science of Mortal Kombat on YouTube. That was really cool, man. And what about like these days? I mean, I know that we talked about you working on like a shoe project. What's kind of in the bucket next? I mean, what's gonna go down?
Yeah, so I mean, I have another digital project going live on Monday, unfortunately, so I can't really talk about that. So that's just in a couple days, but I just shot that about a month ago, and we've been in post. So maybe I can follow up later, and we can pop it in the comments or something. But that's cool. I'm super excited for that. And then I finished up So Cold the River, which you mentioned, in January, which was actually my first time using the Litra studio. And then I did a brief documentary shoot, which I can't go into the creative too much, but with Don McLean, who is a singer-songwriter of American Pie, the kind of a classic song. Sure. I also used the Litra studio on that as well. So like everybody, I mean, the last 2-3 months have been quieter than normal, which actually hasn't been terrible. It's been nice to kind of just relax and get in touch with the family, and just hang out. But yeah. So I've been keeping busy. I also have been doing a lot of writing about something else that I can't talk about, but it'll be released in August.
Yeah, for sure. I know how that goes. Well, you mentioned just now that you did use the Litra studio on some of those projects. let's kind of dive into the studio stuff. I have a list of questions for you, but we can jump around. But really interested to hear what you did with the studio light and kind of what made you come on board with Litra and really start believing in the product, because we know about the Pro, we know about the Torch, and now we have the studio. And as a professional on set and as a director of photography, I mean, how much easier did this thing make your life, from the waterproofness to the power to the size? I mean, can you just walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so in the case of So Cold the River, so Cold the River is based on I think it was a New York Times bestseller novel, and it's a thriller, and it's set in this small town in Indiana called French Lick Springs, a little overlap with this town called West Baden, in this sort of fun, haunted, though in real life, very lovely hotel, and there's a bunch of underwater. Not a bunch. There are some, any underwater sequence is a whole thing, right? So there's multiple underwater sequences in So Cold the River. And, I was talking to the Litra team early on, and, it's a little tough to sort of break through to find out, like, what is good about a product. I'm just saying in general, right? Because everyone has the coolest, flashiest photos, until you get it in your hands, then you know what you're actually dealing with, right? So,
Right.
Litra, yeah, there you go. So actually, I'm lighting myself with studio right now. So they sent me a few studios to try out, and it just happened to be the case that in like 3 days, we were going to be using another brand's lights in the water. And without calling out who they are,
right.
They're very low output, and they're not very punchy, and they're a little tricky to use. So the moment you take the studio out of the box, this thing is like indestructible. I mean, it's actually. Can I see, Drew? Can you add this to the list? Can you please make some videos of you like driving over the studio with like a vehicle?
You got it.
Because I don't think it would do anything. I think
it wouldn't.
Yeah.
I've done it with the Pros and the Torches. I actually have gotten in trouble at trade shows for throwing it on the concrete super hard. So yeah, and it hasn't even fluttered. The light hasn't fluttered. So you're right. It won't do anything. It's very durable.
I mean, the thing is indestructible, which is, by the way, amazing to me. And as a DP, I wasn't the DP on So Cold the River. I was ACAM, and then I did some of the underwater stuff and the drone, and I did a bunch of second unit stuff. Madeline K. Kahn was the DP on So Cold the River, and Heath Gresham was the gaffer. So anyway, as a DP by trade, I kind of send over a list of things I want to every manufacturer, right? Like, make me the perfect thing, which is a super, it's a really hard thing to ask. I want to be able to match existing lighting by adding green or whatever. I want all the effects. I don't use effects that much, but I want it when I need it, right? So I don't have to buy another accessory. Indestructible, waterproof. Didn't know that was an ask, but I'll take waterproof. Internal battery. Absolutely. There's some moments where you just have a pickup, or you need to throw a light in really quick, or you need an eye light. You need to turn the studio down to like 2% because the output is so high. So it was just checking a lot of boxes for us, just right after we unpacked the studio. And then, the best boy, I think Arthur, Heath, the gaffer, and I went to the pool, just started messing around with the studio. Really liked it. You always test in advance, right? You never wait until the day and throw it in the scene for the first time. So we did a bunch of tests on it, again, in this haunted hotel in Indiana, in West Baden, and just blown away by the output to size ratio. Is just, it doesn't make sense, right, on a physics level. I'm looking at it right now. You guys can't see, but I'm looking at the studio right now. And then also this movie had a lot of different parts of the color wheel, that we needed to hit, things like that just made it a no-brainer. And it was, as I said before, much more punchy than the other light brand that we had originally planned for this scene. So without going into the story of So Cold the River too much, it's going to be out at the end of the year.
Cool.
I mean, the studio went from me never having used any Litra products to being in two, I think, pivotal scenes in the film. And I'm very excited once the movie comes out, or even the trailer, to be like, that's the Litra studio in those moments. Because
Yeah.
in one moment it's underwater in a bathtub, and then in another moment it's a key light over a pool with like half of it in the water a little bit. And I think Jake Reeder, the grip, did like a menace arm or something to get the studio really far out in the water. But you wouldn't do that with other brands, right? You need to know that it's not going to just fall apart because of the moisture. So
Sure.
yeah, so at this point I have a couple of studios, and I've just been bringing it on every single gig because there's so many accessories. And actually, I use the table stand accessory more than I thought I would. So I've been using that quite a lot. And I mean, if I was going to pick up a few accessories for the studio, I would always use the grid, and always use the barn doors. You know what I mean? Because I use those all the time. Very rarely is it a situation where I need to like hit an entire wall with a beam of light, right? Usually I'm trying to focus on something specific. So highly recommend, I think it's called a modifier kit.
Yeah, it's a mod kit. So I actually have it. It's actually hitting me right now. So it's about 2 feet away from me. It's on 5. The studio right now is on 5%.
Yeah, I'm on like 4%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got the grid, and it's got a little bit of diffusion in there, hitting the grid, and then I've barn doored it just to kind of hit me directly, so I don't have any fall off on the wall. And you are absolutely right. Like, punchy is the key word, because I can't tell you how bright and vibrant these colors are that come out of this thing. I shot a music video 2 weeks ago, and I think I had it on like, we were in a dull arcade. I had all the lights off, and I had 2 of them, and I want to say that I was on a color cycle at 1%, and the power was at like 10%, and it was almost blowing out on the face, to my camera settings. So extremely, extremely bright. So the modifier is really good. It's nice and directional and things like that. I love hearing that you used it, and your best boy and your gaffer wasn't afraid to put it over the pool, because with the big LED panel or something like that, if that thing drops, it's gone, right? And especially if it's plugged in, then whoever's in the pool, that's not safe. So it's just little not only to help you out as a DP, but it actually makes the people on sets a little bit easier too. So really, really cool, man. I'm really excited to see that. And then when that comes out, I'm sure we'll do a little post about that, just so people can see it in action.
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, and then I did this Don McLean interview at noon, without saying where, in the like desert, basically, right? So very far east, at noon, and it was punchy enough at 100 to be actually putting an edge on the interview subject, which is, again, given the size, just absolutely amazing. And you want to always be working at like 10%, right? Because it's good because you can't go the other way. So it's good to know you can go up to 100, but you don't want to be living at 100 all the time with a light fixture, right? Because you can't go anywhere from there.
Yeah, totally. And it saves a little bit of your battery life too on a lower setting. But how great is that to know that you can still do an interview at in the pure daylight and still get your kick and still shape your lighting outside against the sun. That's saying a lot, because the sun is always overpowering in most cases.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we were in the shade for that moment too, but still, I mean, you're getting bounced from the concrete in every single direction. So again, so that was another time where I was like, this studio thing, I think everyone should look into this.
Yeah, and I've seen more ads for lights that are RGBW or RGBW or just RGB. Well, they show them on top of the camera, but I'm still not seeing the punchiness and the results like the studio. So I'm really, really glad that it's been able to help you on set. I think that is absolutely what this thing was designed for. It's set, not something that you're embarrassed to maybe bring on set just because it's a little bit smaller. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
totally. And
I want to kind of No, go ahead.
Well, and so with other fixtures, though, you're seeing a trade-off, right? The moment you go RGBW, you start interfering with like the pure white light, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like 5600 suddenly seems skewed, 3200 tungsten suddenly seems skewed. Yeah. So in the majority of times, you're probably not going to have a background like the one that you have, right? Like just the majority of times. So you still need to be able to execute tungsten and daylight settings at a high level. And I think the studio excels at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find yourself using the app control at all while on set, or was it still in beta when you had it, or have you played with that at all? Because that's really, really cool.
It's very fast to navigate the rear menus. So the only moments where we used it was when it was over the pool, just so that we didn't have to take the arm back. That was the only moment. Yeah.
Was your best boy controlling that then?
Mm-hmm.
See, that's so cool.
Or it might have been Heath. I don't remember.
Easier now. Fully made his life easier. That's really cool.
Yeah, and we tend to use 512 DMX.
Okay.
DMX use as well. So that actually is one of the Litra products that I haven't tried out, because DMX sort of is ubiquitous on set. So I would like to try out the DMX input at some point. That's on my list.
Yeah, we'll have to get you that cable if you don't have it yet, because that's a really cool thing. I actually haven't tried it out myself either, but I've seen it in action, and it really is cool. I want to backtrack a little bit away from the studio, and this could be included, but I'm kind of just interested, what's on your set card as a DP? I mean, I know it's project dependent, but like if you had your set card laying out there and you could think about what was on that thing in the last 2 or 3 features that you've made, what are those things? What are you using these days?
Yeah, well, actually, I have one of them right here, weirdly. This is the spectrometer that I use. So cool. I always keep that with me. I don't tend to use a light meter. I feel really good these days about the exposure tools that exist, either in camera or on really great 17-inch monitors, right? So older days, some folks still do this, but they sort of walk around the set and say, I would like this reading, talking to their gaffer, I would like this reading at a 2.8, at a 5.6, at a 4, at a 11, whatever it is, and they sort of walk around set and communicate that way. I tend to light through a very high quality calibrated monitor by eye. So it doesn't count as, I don't have a set card per se. I have like a little backpack that I carry with me, but I always have a spectrometer. Let's see, what else? I mean, the spectrometer is key. I got to say, right? Because usually the best types of light interact well with other types of light, right? So the studio, you want a light that's most useful in most situations, but you also want a light that plays well with others. And guaranteeing that is why you have something like a spectrometer. I go around, I see what the fixture that I'm pointing it at light, and it's reading at 57 or 52. Like I have to make a little bit of adjustment there so that I'm getting actual 5600 daylight out of all of the lights that I'm intending to be daylight. So I'll usually do a quick walk around where I just make sure all the lights are doing what the back panel says, which is key. Again, not a problem with Litra stuff because it's actually hitting the Kelvin that it says in the menu.
Yeah.
But a bunch of other fixtures are not. So that's something that just because it says 5600 on another type of fixture doesn't mean you're necessarily hitting that. So that's something to be aware of. Yeah. Other things like, oh, you know what? I always use my phone, honestly, in about 1 million different ways. Yeah. So a hard source, I'll take my phone and I'll bounce to see where the light's actually hitting. I'll use it as like a little mini reflector, and then I'll put an actual frame bounce in there. I do that all the time. I use a bunch of different apps on my phone. I use Shot Designer, which I highly recommend everyone try out. So you can look at first you build the top-down view of your set, and then you just put all your instruments in there, right? So you just plop all your studios and your pros and a couple torches for accent lighting in the background, and you're good to go. But more than that, it's an easy way to communicate with the rest of your team. So I always use Shot Designer. And then I use Sun Scout to figure out where the sun is headed, right? I'm always trying to backlight people whenever possible outside. It is not always possible, but that's what I'm trying to do. And then I also try to figure out whatever focal length I'm going to be at, usually in consultation with the director using any app, trying to figure out, should we be at a 50 millimeter here? And then sometimes I'm also using apps like, let's put it in the shot, or G&E, you're in the frame with this instrument. Here, check out my phone. If you move it here, you're not. Just an easy way to communicate with everybody. And I've also been using actually the Sigma FP Director's Viewfinder mode. So Sigma F lenses and your L mount lenses on it. So I just carry that around set, and then I'm able to see exactly the field of view that I would be getting on a full frame camera, as opposed to a programmatic interpretation of the field of view that I get out of an iPhone or Android app. So long-winded answer, not really on my set cart, mostly just kind of in my pocket as I'm walking around.
Yeah, well, I think that there's something to say about that too. If you know how to utilize those apps and you know how to break that down and make it easier on yourself, and it saves you time, or the best boy's time running to the set cart, or your AC's time. I think that's what it's all about. Is time is money on set.
Well, so time is money, but it's also a morale. It's a morale thing that I actually care about deeply, right? Because very early in my career, I would put a light somewhere, tell them to turn it off, tell them to move it. I'd put the tripod there, tell the AC team to move it, and stuff's heavy. So using tools like this helps, keep your team healthy, A, and then B, it's just good for morale. People don't like 9 lens swaps per setup,
True.
Usually, especially with using primes. You can always use a zoom, but.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, again, you're saving time for everyone, and I think that's cool. So on the app, I forgot the name that you were saying. There's a bunch of different ones, but which one do you use?
Artemis?
The one that you design your lighting scenarios with?
Shot Designer.
Shot Designer. Are you using that on your phone?
Yeah.
And are you just like sending a JPEG out or like an image out to the crew the night before, or on the morning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for super complicated scenes where there may be like 100 extras or something, I would do it like a week or two before, after the scout usually.
Sure.
But definitely on smaller things that we're all moving quickly. It's one person in front of a camera, 2 people talking to each other. I will for sure send it out the night before, definitely to the gaffer, definitely to the key grip. And I'll even put in my modifiers, my frames in there. I'll label everything.
Yeah.
Most sets are at their core a cube, right? So most interior designers will tell you can do anything with a cube. So I try to use practicals whenever possible. I try to work with the art team to make sure there's not a moire pattern all over the entire set, that we're using primary colors, things like that. The biggest thing is making sure all the practicals are true color, and then motivated lighting. Obviously super important for me as well. So I'll just see where the windows are in real life and try to emulate that whenever possible. Yeah. People don't like unmotivated lighting,
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that makes it easier, and it makes it come off more natural, obviously. So we kind of know what's in your gear bag and what you're using. Now I kind of want to talk about the process itself. What is your favorite part of the process? I mean, whether you're in a producer role or whether you're in a director of photography role, a lot of what you just spoke about would be a director of photography role to an extent. What is your favorite part of the process, and why? What keeps you waking up in the morning and loving your job?
DP hyphen thing, it can be a little confusing for people, and I acknowledge that. There are some great ones out there, Reed Morano being right near the top. I think Rachel Morrison is doing producer and DP now. So there are some obviously incredible people out there with those hyphens that at least I look up to as heroes, and I aspire to have work out there like what they make. But on the producing side, I like the beginning to end process. I like being there sort of at the moment when the idea is just a little kernel and we're trying to make something out of it. I like the execution side of that, and then I also like the delivery. And of course, there's benefits being both producer and DP. There are trade-offs too, right? Like I have to work with an incredible first AD on set, right? To keep me focused, to keep my head where it needs to be at any given moment. But the benefits being that, you know, love post-production, but they can do anything they want to your image, right? I mean, they can, an 8K shot out of a monstro, they can reframe that any way they want. Well, I mean, I can take any of your shots, Drew, I guarantee it, and turn them into 80s VHS looking footage. So as producer, I mean, you get to have a little bit more oversight over decisions like that, obviously in parallel with the director, depending on what the project is. So, and then from a purely career business perspective, I like both because as a DP, often I'm on a job for like 3 days. And as a producer, I'm on a job for like 6 weeks. And they both kind of work with different parts of my brain. So I love that. And honestly, some people only know me as a DP. Some people only know me as a producer. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I think on projects where people understand and respect that hyphen or see the value in having a person fulfilling a role like that, I really enjoy those projects, honestly, the most.
Okay, that's really cool. So there's not one that, you know, weighs out the other. I think, like you said, you know, a producer kind of works this part of the brain, whereas the DP works this part of the brain. And I think change is always good. If you're like me, you don't want to do the same thing every single day anyway. So maybe that's what keeps you going, and the change up is always interesting to you. That's, for me, that's what does it a lot of the times, whether it's project based or you're shooting a music video now, or then you're shooting a narrative film, or then a commercial and a month later, you know. So
I don't know if I'm like the season 3 DP. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think by season 3, I'd probably want to shoot a different thing. You know, hats off to people working on shows like Grey's Anatomy for like 8 years, but that'd be hard. I mean, you know, good consistent work is good, but oh my gosh,
yeah.
I'd probably want to switch genres.
I also think too, though, there's a whole side of that to where you can
start. Oh yeah.
You could start by looking at like season 1 or 2 of where you started, and then by season 6, you can really see yourself develop, and then, you know, it's all filmed the same way, and then, you know, there's just little things that maybe progress the story more, and you figured out. So I think there's pros and cons to that, but I'm kind of like you, man. Like season 3, you know, it's fine, I'm done. Let's go to the next project.
Yeah, and with full love to the creative team before I leave, right? But it's just like,
Sure.
you know, because at some point on longer gigs, I find myself like constantly switching up the technology to like keep my brain active. That's why, honestly, 2 weeks into filming, very willing to try out the Litra studio. I was like, oh, let's give it a shot, because I'd never used a Litra product, and, you know, worth giving it a try. And I'm always willing to do that. Because it gives me a little gadget, you know, or a big gadget to play with.
Well, and it worked out for you too. It made your life
Yeah.
easier. So that's a win-win right there. It keeps you busy and it keeps you happy. Now let's chat about the importance of lighting. You know, we know as DPs how important lighting is, and how that really, you know, shapes the image, and it really defines what you're looking at. What is something that you've maybe is your favorite technique, or something that you've discovered recently that you haven't done and you tend to use it more? Is there a lighting technique, or is there a lighting setup that, you know, you said that you're always backlighting outside. I think that makes a ton of sense. But what is something that maybe you've only done once and you thought it was cool and you can't wait to do it again, or something like that? And you might have to think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question. I will say I have my things that I do every time, you know, but I can switch out the fixture, right? So I tend to always try to backlight. I will say, though, and I don't know if this is about me in per se, but there's a tendency for newer cinematographers to try to always make your key light as soft as possible, right? So in the case of the studio, adding softbox on the front, or that kind of silicone modifier too, that's softening the light at the cost of a couple stops of output. But there's something about hard light, which I don't think people should be afraid of. You also shouldn't be afraid of shadows, right? There are all these things that I think when you're first starting off in your career as a DP, people get afraid of. They're like, you know, shadows are bad. Hard light on a person's face is bad. And I mean, look, honestly, there's some famous, there you go. And there's some famous examples of talent actually having in their contracts certain things that as a DP you're not allowed to do. Like they always get the softest key light in the world, plus, you know, like a black pro mist 9, you know.
Sure.
There's talent that will say that. So yeah, I've been playing around with hard light more lately. I mean, the biggest thing is I'm just trying to be open. This is something I'm actively working on, is I try to be open to what the environment is already doing when I walk in to a room. Like in the case I just mentioned earlier, like for 100 extra scene that I have to plan 2 weeks out, walking into that room and seeing the light in the most beautiful possible way that I'd never seen before, when I was there on the Scout, I mean, there's something about just embracing that. Yeah. and just being willing to change up something that you've planned for weeks, ideally before the grip team has put up a condor lift with a gigantic fixture on.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Right, yeah, ideally you're not making the choice as they're like halfway up doing that. I don't know. I mean, as I said, I'm always trying to change it up just a little bit. There's about 1 million different kinds of diffusion.
Yeah. Totally.
All have a specific number. I mean, look, try 216 tomorrow. Try something else. You know, It doesn't always have to be opal or whatever. So it just ends up being little technical things that to sort of the untrained eye, I'm not sure if they know. Get a light is really low intensity to get a great eye light. So, you know, always, don't be afraid of using 14 millimeter. I mean, I'm working on lots of stuff, Drew.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, I always say, and I've kind of developed this new saying for lighting: there is no right, there is no wrong, but there is an ugly. So you can, what I mean by that is you can experiment, and it can be something that you haven't been taught or you were said no, but it looks cool and it works, right? There's obviously a right way of doing a key light, whether it's sharper or softer like yours. That's good. Okay, that's okay too. It looks good, but if it's ugly on through the frame, I don't think that's what we should be using.
100%. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, but what is ugly? I would say that flat lighting tends to be ugly. Well, here's another thing that I've been experimenting with a lot recently too, is the person in the foreground speaking. Does that person have to have the highest exposure over the background? Try lighting the background a little bit more, and just get enough to see their eyes in the foreground. I mean, you start getting into really fun territory when someone is walking through light sources and they're dark and they're lit and they're dark and they're lit, and then they end up somewhere half exposed. I mean, oh my gosh.
And
Best stuff in the world.
And then you just say, that was your intention. And then when they stepped into that conversation and then they're darker, it's how their mood was. You find ways, at least I do, my brain finds ways to communicate that with the viewer or the director if they have a question about it, right? So I think that's a really good point. Like, we set up streetlights in one of our short films, and they were fake streetlights. They were big light sources, and they were oranges. They had orange filters on them, and he would walk in.
Sodium vapor.
The point was to space them out more than an actual street light, because you there?
Yeah, I can hear you. I missed right after you said sort of an orange source outside the window as a street light kind of deal.
Yeah. So it was a street light, but we separated them farther on purpose, so he would walk into darkness and then come back in and then walk into darkness. So to your point, I mean, I think experimenting is A-okay, and then there's always ways to justify that to what you're doing in frame.
100%. I would encourage everyone to try out every possible kind of glass filtration that exists out there in the world as a DP, because I mean, there's a whole argument, we don't have to get into it now, about burning in the image before, again, sending it to post and they start tinkering with it.
Mm-hmm.
But as a DP, right, I think that job is your keeper of the image, despite modern digital cameras being so malleable by the post team, right? So there's an argument for burning in an image using a specific lens type or glass filtration in front of the camera so that it isn't up to interpretation, because you send a raw or a log file to post, and again, you could turn it into anything. Really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, but I think again, as a producer, that's where you like to have that control, right? Because you only get that control up to the delivery and the handoff. I know that
That's true, Drew. Maybe I have a problem with control. Actually, I want to make it clear, I do like collaborating with people, and I do have big teams that I work with. But yeah, it isn't just me as DP asking for things and then me as producer being like, yes.
Yeah, yeah. That's why you director of photography and producer on the same thing would be extremely beneficial. Yeah, right.
It's beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to get into. I know at the start we talk a little bit more, especially if people have filtered through and off and on. I just want to ask you a simple question. You can interpret this how you want. How has the Litra Studio made your life easier while on set?
I mean, portability, the fact it's indestructible are two of the big ones. Yeah. I mean, also just the form factor of the body. I mean, you can put a couple of these anywhere and it doesn't matter. As I said earlier about the morale thing with having people move heavy stuff around, you do take a hit on your body as you're moving just big instruments around and big grip stuff all day. But with the studios, you can audition them places. You could hold them up and just be like, nope, move it. Okay, that's great. And it's just not a consideration that should take any time for you. Yeah, I mean, I tend to be shooting very long hours, so I'll use the battery, walk around set, be like, okay, that looks nice, and then I'll plug in to something usually, because these are 12-hour days. Stuff, obviously I'm using the internal battery in that instance, which is also very cool. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I never want to use a gel again after using the studio, so sorry, don't send me gels.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Roscoe.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the whole point of this thing, man, is to simplify but also, be punchy and put out the output that it's intended to. Something we didn't discuss was the battery swap, which I think is really cool.
That's a great point.
Yeah, Litra patented the battery, and you can actually plug any other USB source and or USB-C source into the battery out of the casing, which is really cool. So if for some reason you do run out of battery, if you use it for a while, that battery is fully replaceable, which is pretty big time. Like, you're not waiting for something to charge, and unless you have multiple batteries. I just think that's a big thing for sure.
I mean, that is such a great point. But beyond that too, so many people in the RGBW space are just building in their batteries.
Yeah.
And when the battery dies, like all lithium ion technology does, you're kind of done. So,
Yeah, you're sacrificing some time there, which I mean, for me, if I was paying for a light source, that is not something I would want to justify while on
time and money. You're sending the entire source in. So having a removable battery is like insanely awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to now chat about what is next for you. I know you're busy. I know you have a lot of stuff planned. I know you have a lot of stuff getting released this year. The Right Girls, I believe, is about to be released.
Yeah, so I don't... The Right Girls is going to be released end of Q3. Okay. So again, I'll circle back probably with ways that people can check that out. Miss White Light is coming out Q3, Q4, somewhere in there as well. It's a little... State of the industry is a little bit odd. But yeah, those are the next two feature-length things that are coming out that I'm super excited about. And then, a bunch of other stuff on the docket that hopefully I'll get more clarity on what I can and can't share, which, sidebar, I mean, just NDAs make social media very tricky. Like I could talk about like nothing ever. So I'm like, please.
Yeah. Well, I
You
remember
know.
on the podcast, I asked you, I wanted to chat about Litra a little bit, and at the time when we recorded the podcast, you were like, I can't really talk about that right now. And it was like, oh, that's what we wanted to talk about, But I completely understand. I think also none of us were prepared to be on lives and on podcast and everything all at one time, in the last couple of months. So I think that's part of the awesome part. That's the whole thing about this thing is like, it's another awesome part is you are now building up the suspense for the viewer, and now they can look forward to something. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. Yeah, but it does seem to be a major conflict with social media. But as a producer, I appreciate the need for keeping things quiet until they're ready to share, and things like that. So that's something I'm sort of always balancing on the producer side. But yeah.
No, for sure, man. So what's next? I guess I just asked that, but I guess I want to ask any advice for someone looking to get into the industry full time. So there's a lot of people on here that might be doing this just as a hobby, or they wanted to get to the level that you're at and be out in California working on really cool projects. What is like one piece of advice you could leave for our viewers?
I mean, the biggest thing for me early on starting out, and honestly something that I maybe didn't consider while I was at Indiana University for school, like over 10 years ago, is how many of those connections, of those relationships that I formed early on, I would still be working with those same people. Because I think one of the reasons it's so hard to break into entertainment for new people just getting started is because everyone keeps like this vice pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, more risks now are so extraordinary, right? Somebody is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of like 3 days to make a thing, in the case of like high-end commercial.
Yeah.
You don't want to take the risk on sort of an unproven quantity, right? Yeah. Sure. In that moment. And I understand that. I see that side as well. So what ends up happening is you stay in touch with your network. You sort of all grow together as people throughout your career, and you keep working with them for decades and decades and decades. And you work with new people occasionally. That absolutely happens. But if you're just starting off, the biggest advice I would give is just look at the people in your life that are interested in the similar sort of things, than you are. You might only do stills, but the video people have I think, a lot of insight into the world of stills, and sort of vice versa. Look at those people in your life, reach out to them, stay in contact with them, find ways to help them without having, an agenda about it. Have a plan, not an agenda. That's something I always say is, and build up the people around you, right? Because there's really nothing better than that you can do. Yeah, and I say that a lot, but that's been the biggest takeaway from sort of the last 10 years of working.
And drop the ego and just make people around you feel comfortable, and then being the guy that you want to work around, and I can tell you're that type of guy just from talking with you so many times. Like, I want to work with you, man. Like, not just because of our Indiana University background, but you seem like the kind of guy that like it would be really fun to work with, and you have an agenda, but you are, kind of easygoing as well while on set. So,
well, it's so we've all met the people on set who they're acting sort of like they're in combat.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So you've met those people, right, that are just like, trying to grit their teeth and make a thing, make a project happen. And that translates to the screen, that kind of attitude towards your process, how you do your work. So, I mean, that's another bit of advice. Take a look at how you are on set as a person, and how you are empowering the people around you to do their best work as well, because that is so key. Because we, like the So Cold the River, had a crew of maybe 70 people on it. Yeah, and you just have to be able to collaborate with all types of different people, and that's just such, you have to, at the end of the day, you can be a genius cinematographer. If you're not a good person, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, I think that's extremely good. That's extremely important and good advice. I think, I don't know, I feel like we work so hard to get into this part of, you know, the industry and be in the positions we're in. I think you should keep it fun and keep it light and always have your agenda though. Like, you know, you are there for a certain reason. You're there
A plan, not an agenda. I feel like agenda is a little loaded a bit, like a Machiavellian sort of plan. I'll go plan.
Yeah, I like plan. That's good. Graham, it was awesome seeing you again, man. It was awesome talking with you. I could talk to you for another hour, but we're going to get cut off here on Instagram Live. So I really, really appreciate you joining us on the Creative Corner. And if anyone has questions for Graham, hit him up on Instagram there. His Instagram link is down there at the bottom. It's pinned. And also your website, I think it's just, is it grahamsheldon.com, I believe?
.net. There's a guy at Microsoft that has .com. So if you're watching Arch Nemesis,
time to forfeit the URL.
And thank you, Drew, yes, please, and thank you, Drew, and thank you, you know, Litra, for creative sort of an outlet right now during this absolute strange time. To see all the different folks that come on to Creative Corner from just such different backgrounds, and you know, I've watched the show in the past too, and it's just anyway, it's very cool what you guys are doing. So keep it up, don't stop.
Awesome, Graham. Thank you so much, man, for your time. I will be in contact with you in the future for sure. Next time I'm out your way, I want to grab lunch with you and just chat more projects, man. So awesome, dude. I really appreciate it, and I will talk with you soon. I really appreciate your time.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Graham.
Bye, Drew. Bye, everybody.
See ya. Guys, Graham Sheldon, that was awesome. That guy he's so cool. Like I said, he was on our podcast, the Take 43 podcast, last month. I think it's episode 9. Get on Spotify, get on Apple podcast as well, and search the Take 43 podcast. You can listen to all things creative. And Graham was on there, and he talked a lot about specific stuff from the projects. He didn't dive into too much detail about the projects here just because we didn't have enough time, but he talks about his digital releases and his features as well. So that was really cool. I'm really excited that we got to talk to Graham in front of everyone, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, this was Litra's Creative Corner. We will see you again next Thursday, and take care. Be safe, everyone. Keep smiling.